Hari ini aku mau ikut ada salah satu workshop oleh Sean Wise. Dia itu adalah seorang entrepreneur dan coach. Keren banget deh pokoknya. Acara ini diselenggarakan oleh UNE, University of New England, yang dilaksanakan di kampus cabangnya dia di desaku di Tamworth. Nah ini dia, aku lagi jalan dari parkiran ke kampus UNE di Tamworth. Hari ini sangat cerah, langit biru seperti biasa dan tidak terlalu panas. Oke, mau masuk dulu. Smart Regions Incubator. Is it? Nah, ini lobbynya. Aku mau daftar dulu ya. Oke, udah daftar. Terus sekarang aku masuk ke dalam. Aku datangnya tidak terlalu pagi, pas kok, cuma belum banyak yang datang. Nah, ini dia ruangnya. Oke, saya siap untuk dapat ilmu hari ini.
I feel welcome enough. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the things I've learned on my journey. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. So if you're unaware, the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship is the champion of startups and entrepreneurship in New South Wales. It answers to the 12 post-secondary colleges and universities that support it. And the University of Newcastle and the University of New England have asked for us to come here and share. So the first discussion is about why now is the best time to be an entrepreneur, and the second discussion after lunch is sort of 5 things professional investors wish you knew but will never tell you. So to kick things off a little bit, you're welcome to take photos. Some of the slides people find very impactful. By all means, I ask that you sort of flag some of these, not for the extra tweets, but so that I can see what resonated locally with people. So if there's something you like, feel free, just please add the hashtag or the name of the organization. Our goal today is really simple. We're going to focus on today, this day, and this time, why now is the best time. But in order to do that, I think it's important in a world where we have a president in the White House that believes in fake news and alternative reality truths. I think it's important that you hear not only what's being said, but ask who's saying it. Why are they saying it? What is the context? So we encourage our students to think critically, and I think to do that, I give you some context. And then of course, I'd like to know a little bit about you. So me, I had my first startup at 13, I took my first company public at 31. I was honored by Canada with the National Mentor. So answering to yourself, although you really answer to your customers and your spouse and your kids, because you gotta feed them, right? But I get it. Any other reasons come to mind? If I offer you free stuff.
The challenge of it.
Oh, well, sorry, go ahead.
The challenge of it.
The challenge of it. Free stuff. Oh, she gets the clap. I do the work and she gets the clap. I like this country. Any other reasons? How about the reason no one wants to say out loud but we all know is true? Any guesses?
Money.
Money. Right? You don't get to be a shark without making the money. You don't get to be a dragon. You don't get to choose every minute of your day when you're beholden to someone else. So when we look at it, those are the same reasons on a global basis. I had an idea that needed to go to market. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted a better balance. I wanted to do more creative and innovative things, and I wanted to be with my family in control. So then the question becomes, why haven't you started yet? My friend with the pink earrings.
I have started.
Okay. Who hasn't started yet? Now no one's raising their hand. I asked the question and you said you hadn't, so I'm going to call you. Yes. What's your reason?
Why I haven't started?
Yeah, why do you?
I really will fail.
They're afraid of failure. Other ideas? My friend from our economic development team. Why do people want to be entrepreneurs and then hold back? What's causing that? Uncertainty. Entrepreneurship isn't like employment. At employment, you show up at 9, your pencils are on your desk, your paper's in front of you, you do what you're told. You wake up as an entrepreneur, what you're doing today really can change, and how you're going to change it. So uncertainty, fear of failure, cash flow, don't have enough money to get started, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, anything else? So on a national level, feeling frightened of failure is number one. People miss the point, of course, that if you don't try, you've already failed. You can't win a race unless you're running it. So it's easy because then you know you failed. But definitely the number one, fear of failure. Number two, I don't know how to get started. As if there is some mystical starting point that you just weren't told about. Feeling too low in my confidence, I don't know what idea to do, I'm too old, I'm too young, I have no money, right? I live outside a major city, I can't do it, I don't know how. So what if I told you that all of those excuses aren't applicable anymore? That in the last 2 decades, they've all been addressed. And because they've been addressed, now is really the best time to start a business. So what if I told you that the excuses holding you back aren't valid? And what if I told you that because they're not valid, there's no more excuses, and that's why it's the time to get started? So let's focus on that. I have been a founder for over 30 years. I founded more than 5 different businesses and been part of 3 different venture funds. It's hard. It's really hard. On TV, it looks much easier than it really is. The uncertainty, the variance, the pressure can be excruciating. You know, people struggle. How do I get the revenue to flow? How do I know that this idea is better than that idea? How do I know if this opportunity is for me? Because not every opportunity is for every person. You know, what are the first steps I should take? What are the next steps? When do I quit the only thing that's paying the mortgage? When do I double down and take the risk? How do I fund it until then? What can I learn from other people who have done that and not failed? How do I keep myself engaged so that I can constantly be learning? How do I risk and mitigate that risk by taking actions? So if it's so hard, then why is everyone talking about it? Here's a handful of magazines that I took pictures of at the airport, all talking about entrepreneurship. In fact, even Hollywood is behind startups now. Amazon has Startup, which is a great limited series. Silicon Valley is a show on HBO. But entrepreneurs are these new rock stars. When I was growing up, you know, people wanted to talk about getting in a band and we become rich and famous for the band. Today's band is a startup. And so what do I mean by a startup? I mean a company that is actively searching for a sustainable, repeatable, scalable business model. That's what a startup is. If a startup knew its business model, it wouldn't be a startup. It would be a small and medium-sized enterprise. When a new hairdresser comes to town, that is an entrepreneur because they think there's an unmet need for haircuts. But the business model of haircut is pretty well known. You go in, you pay them out, they cut your hair. But if you were trying to figure out a new business model for a hairdresser, maybe at $9.99 a month. You pay me $9.99, you can have all the haircuts you want. Or maybe it's a barter exchange. Or maybe we get students from the barber college to cut it for free. You take your risk. The idea is that a startup is trying to find this business model before it runs out of resources. Whether there be the bank account resources, the inheritance, the money from the full-time job. You have only until your resources dry up to find that model. So we should all be very clear. A business plan is 40 pages of material that no one reads. A business model is how the business runs. If you have a pizza restaurant, you buy the ingredients, you add low-paid staff, you mix it together, and you sell it for more. That's the business model. If you're Netflix, I give you as many movies that you may or may not want to watch, you pay me $9.99. Startups are looking for that model. And in particular, they're looking for a model that's repeatable. Right? An artist makes a beautiful painting, but it's often not repeatable until they put it on t-shirts and start selling it. So you have to find what's repeatable so that you can do better by doing more. If your business does worse the more you sell, you don't have a good business. It has to be scalable. Does anyone know what the term scalable refers to? It means that revenue is growing faster than costs. When you make a car, that costs the steel, the rubber, the electronics, but it also costs marketing and engineering diagrams, but those get used again and again. The difference between fixed and variable costs. When you go through your model, in order to scale, revenue has to go up. So as you make the 100th car, you've amortized the investment in R&D and you're just getting paid. So you want to have a scalable business because as it grows, the margin will grow. Software is the best example. Software as a service, like Facebook. Your grandmother joins Facebook, she adds in all the pictures of her cats. It costs Facebook a penny. Penny in storage, a penny in onboarding. Because they have millions of people onboarding, they can divide the costs amongst millions of people. But Facebook makes $45 a year from your grandmother. Facebook sells ads that, when divided by the total number of users, works out to $45 a person. So every time I get a new user, it's a penny, and I make $45. That's scale. Every time someone searches Google, it doesn't cost Google very much. But every time someone searches Google, they get a Google ad. And some of those ads get clicked. So they can calculate how much revenue is coming based on how much costs. The idea of finding a startup business model is to find one where the revenue continues to increase, but the costs start to flatline. So you want to be repeatable, you want to be scalable, and finally you want to be sustainable. That's really important, especially for social entrepreneurs, right? It's not enough to make money. You have to make enough money that you can support the business going forward. A not-for-profit still has to pay someone the wage, the rent, the lights. So a scalable, repeatable, sustainable business model is what the startup is hunting for. So what's driving entrepreneurship to be on all of these magazine covers? What's driving young people today to want to be entrepreneurs and not rock stars? Well, in America, which is not where I'm from, but in America, it's true. In America, currently we are just a year away from more than 50% of the workforce not being employed. So 50% are freelancers, are working casual, they don't have the pension, they don't have the long-term commitment. Now, 2 or 3 decades ago, this was about 10%. You know, if you had a graphic designer in your business, they worked for you. Now that person has been outsourced and they work for themselves. And that's really been a shift in who pays the cost. So freelancers pay their own rent, their own computer. But it's growing. By 2030, America reports that 40% of current employee jobs will be shut down and moved to automation. We're now seeing startups that can out-lawyer lawyers. And so a computer can out-lawyer a lawyer for a much lower cost than the lawyer. So imagine you want to incorporate, you used to have to pay a couple $100 to a lawyer to help you with the forms. Now you literally talk to a chatbot, and at the end of it, it shoots out the incorporation and it costs you $10. These are things going on. It's not just manufacturing, it's white-collar jobs, education jobs, professional services. And like Canada, although we love to talk about our startups, that 1% of high-tech growth companies that do billions of dollars, the majority of our economy is small and medium-sized businesses, family-owned businesses, businesses with less than 20 employees. That makes up our GDP. So I think that's pretty similar. And most importantly, all the new jobs in the US economy that they're so happy about are not coming from the Fortune 500. They're coming from the entrepreneurs on the way up. Ubers of the world are employing more people than the Dow Chemicals of the world. I'm happy to say that you guys are doing great. We've got 3 Canadian cities in this list. We've got 1 Australian city in this list, and a pretty good spread. So a lot of people around the world are looking to startups because they're going to increase the innovation output and they're the source of jobs for the future. So what's driving this boom on a macro level? I've given you the stats, but what underlies it? Why is now the best time? These are the 5 reasons I want to take you through. And each of these reasons undermines one of those fears that is holding you back. So let's start with the easiest one. When I started as a VC, I worked in Wall Street for Ernst & Young in 1997. When we were writing checks, the checks were for $5 million and they were on a business plan. There was no app, There was no starting, because they needed that money to build everything from scratch. In 1997, if you wanted a jewelry store, there was no PayPal to help you with processing. There was no LinkedIn to help you authenticate the user. There was no Facebook for you to buy ads on. There was no Google AdWords for you to buy ads on. There was no out-of-the-box website that I could just pick logos and boom, there I have a website, a login platform, if you will. Everything was hard-coded. If you wanted to take a credit card, you had to write the merchant transaction engine because it didn't exist. It's like coming to a country and there's no infrastructure. The first settlers have to build the infrastructure or the next group will have the same problems. So we've had 3 waves of startups. We've had the dot-com boom in the late 90s. We've had Web 2.0, which peaked around 2007. And we have our current age, which we call the age of the unicorn. A unicorn is just a stupid term that VCs call a company that is less than 5 years old that is worth more than $1 billion. Before I left, we counted, there's about 147 unicorns currently active in the world. But that's a big difference. So in the first dot-com boom, we had things like Amazon and Google and Yahoo. And then in Web 2.0, we got the Tinders and the Facebooks and the Twitters. And now in the age of unicorns, we've got this, what do the kids call it? Swipe right, swipe left, Tinder. Right? But it is. When I was young, Tinder was a bar on campus. Hi, I'm Sean. No. Hi, I'm Sean. No. Hi, I'm Sean. My kids just do this and left and right. What does Tinder do? It removes the risk of rejection. Right? It tells you who thinks you're cute before you have to hit on them. And again, I only joke about it because look at its 100 million users. Look at its 10 million a month in revenue. Laugh all you want. I came up with that. But over the years, from the dot-com to the beginning of Web 2.0 to the emergence of the age of unicorns, costs have dropped. Why? Because we have PayPal. With PayPal, I can take money and processing credit cards in less than 10 minutes. Drag and drop the code. We have LinkedIn and Facebook, which allow us to authorize who you are, to confirm, and for us to mine for data. So today, if I want to launch a store to sell jewelry, it's gone as low as $500. I just go to Shopify.com, I pick a bunch of templates, I throw up the pictures of my jewelry, and before the day is done, it's live. That took 2 years and $2 million in 1997. My nephew can do it in a weekend. He's like 60. The point being, how many people could borrow $5 million? Just me, okay? How many people could borrow $500? You gotta participate. Come on. You don't have that? You don't have a credit card you could borrow against? Okay, let's kind of be active here. You're making me feel not engaged. So the number of people who can start a startup when you need $500 is exponentially larger than the number of people who you needed $5 million from. In fact, this was the era where venture capitalists with their fancy suits and their jeans were the kingmakers. Because you needed their money to get started, and if you didn't get it, you never got started. So we believed, myself included, we knew what we were doing. Then the dot-com bust happened, and the truth sunk in. We had no idea what we were doing. We weren't the actual best people to be deciding these things. You know who's the best person to decide if a company is valuable? Customers, stakeholders, not some guy from Wall Street. So as this number dropped, the need for external investment shifted. Listen, VCs still want to invest $2 to $5 million, but a business plan is no longer what's required. An actual business is what's required. In fact, most VCs won't invest until your cost of client acquisition is less than 1/3 of your lifetime value. Meaning, until you've proven you can acquire customers at a low fee and sell them at a big fee, VCs don't want to fund. So if they're not funding, who is? The angel investors, the seed funds. So because I have $1 billion fund, I'm not going to give it out $5,000 at a time. I'm going to wait for companies to grow to the right size. What I want you to take away is that as this number dropped, so did the barriers to trying something new. My students launch startups every semester. They're not brilliant startups. They're not even fully functioning startups. They're tests to see if they've got a value that's worthwhile pursuing. They're tests to confirm customers. They're tests to figure out channels. And the process of building a startup has shifted from fund me and I'll figure it out to figure it out and I'll fund you. Or as we like to say, you've gone from ready, aim, fire to ready, fire, aim. So we expect, before you get our check, that you've already created a prototype. You've already found some customers, and you're looking for money to continue that process as you hunt for product market fit, which means you sell it for a lot and it pays for a little. What that's done is it removed the barrier of having to know someone who could give you $500. Most people in the room could get $500 to test their idea. So you didn't have to drop out of school, go raise the money, and then deploy it. You would stay in school, deploy it, get the proof, and then raise the money. And it's a huge change because it's empowering. You don't need someone's permission to start. You start when you're ready. And that makes it a better time for entrepreneurs. The second thing that has changed the landscape is, as of this morning, there are 3,424,971,237 people on the internet. Now, I don't doubt that the 3.4 billion, about 55%, 60% makes sense. What I don't get is the 37. Like, how do they know? Like, do they track actual logons? But they do. There's an internet provider in the Netherlands that will give you that number. But the idea is that all over the world, people are accessing the internet through smartphones, through the cellular network. They're not doing it the old school way of the cables under the ground. Why is that important? Well, first let me prove it to be true. How many people have bought something online in the last 30 days? How many people have bought something online in the last 90 days? How many people did not buy something online in the last year? That's 1 out of 40, that's 2%. The rest of us have bought something. It's not just us, it's the rest of the world. Whatever you're selling, someone's buying. And the proof, the example I like to give, anyone else here like Star Trek and Star Wars? Okay. So when I was a young lad, I loved Star Trek. And I wanted a gold Captain Kirk uniform shirt, as 12-year-olds do. And I had to wait to that day, once a year, when the comic book science fiction convention came through the city as it traveled across North America. Because that was the only place that those shirts were available, because that was the only place where customers would go. But today, if I want a Captain Kirk authentic jersey, you know what I do? I Google it. And within 24 hours, it's being shipped to me. So I don't have to be in the city big enough to host a comic book convention. I also, as the seller of the jersey, don't even have to be awake. I can just let it run itself in the background. So because of this, we have the long tail theory, which says 80% of the people like the same things. The best books, the best TV shows, the Games of Thrones of the world. But that rest of the tail is available for some things. So who would have thought a book on Klingon poetry was a thing? But it is a thing. And why is it a thing? Because in a global population of 6 billion, there are enough crazy people who want to learn Klingon poetry. Again, if you had a bookstore, you would put Stephen King on the shelf. You wouldn't put the Klingon poetry because you don't have a big enough market. But when you switch from a physical, geographic-centric model to a global digital model, it doesn't matter what you're selling. There's probably someone interested in it. There's even a rule on the internet that whatever your weirdness is, somebody else has the same weirdness. So lawn gnomes, jewelry made out of bones, things that would be niches now have full markets. So no matter what you're selling, because you have a global audience, it's way better to be an entrepreneur. This has a second impact, the globalization of the internet. And that is, you're no longer limited to have co-founders that you know. When I went to MBA school in the 90s, if we wanted to start a business, I only had the 20 or 30 other students to kind of team up with, and maybe people I knew in my personal life. But today, I can go to founderdating.com or a dozen other sites. I can upload the same sort of thing you would upload to a dating site, but the business side of it. And the algorithms will give me recommendations by distance of people actively looking for that role. So for me, all my students are great business students. They can't code at all. So every single one of them needs a computer scientist, a coder, or something eventually. But they don't want to just limit themselves to the people they see every day. They want to access the world. And because the world is connected, you have co-founders that don't live in the same city. You're not restricted to people you can see. Now, there is some evidence that you don't want to be too far from your co-founders because face-to-face is an important way to communicate. But you're not limited to the town you live in. Whereas 20 years ago, that was your only option. So the third reason why it's great to be an entrepreneur now is no matter what you're missing in your founding team, there's someone else in the world looking to fill that spot. The fourth is one that I know firsthand. I've been in your wonderful country for 3 weeks, and I've managed all of our businesses from my smartphone. Signing off documents, proofreading things, writing press releases, but you can do almost any business function now through apps, through online, from bookkeeping to point of sale to 3D printing. There are tools and platforms freely available for you to mine. Everything from how do I find future customers, like a database of potentials, right through to how do I pay my taxes without having to work through them myself. But these tools and platforms have made it so easy. You know, you don't need code to make a website. You just need a Blogger platform and choose some pre-existing templates. So these tools allow entrepreneurs to not focus on non-core competencies, accounting and hiring and buying ads. Those can all be done through automation and through tools, and the tools can live in an office the size of your smartphone. The final of the 5 reasons why now is better comes from the idea that we've had 2 decades and about 10,000 startups. And unlike the large corporations that took generations to become billion-dollar companies, they've done it in a short period of time. But that period of time is so small, 5-10 years, that I can study it as an academic, where it's much harder to study a 200-year-old company. I can study it and see how they got there. So what I mean by that is we've had opportunity to reverse engineer how startups grow. Wow, this is a very tough audience. Do you not have South Park in Australia? Like, come on. This is not the correct path. I think we've all figured that out, okay? This is not how you become a successful entrepreneur. But obviously, I need a better humor channel. This is a document that I found in 2007 in San Francisco. Funders and Founders is like an investment club where high net worth individuals get together monthly and they listen to pitches and make investments. But they put together this really basic general diagram. And after I looked at it a bunch of times, I realized it's actually right. It's actually right. It's got the pivots back, it's got the launch early and often, it's refunding till later, it's focused on customers, blah, 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 blah. But the problem was, I couldn't give this to my students and say, fly. Because my students were all raised with bubble wrap and not told to take risks, and 7th place is okay. And they're freaked out by uncertainty. They want to know what to do, when to do it, and what order to do it in. I don't have MIT and Stanford level students. I don't have Jeff Skoll and Jeff Bezos-like people. I have really 20-year-olds who've never had a job, who are trying to figure out what the future holds. And giving them this was useless. So my university spent 2 years and 3 academics to do this. This is 100 steps to startup. We took the MIT program called Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which has 24 steps, and we took the Stanford Lean Startup program, which had 30 steps, and we took it to a much bigger degree. You know, get a website, buy a domain name. You know, all of these are the same steps that the successful entrepreneurs between Tinder and Twitter and Flickr, all the companies, the Googles, the Yahoos, the Amazon, that we examined, we backed reverse engineered. So this will get you to sort of break even, and this starts with, I have no idea what to do. And each of these steps has a video, and each of these steps has an experiment, and each of these steps has a workshop. And the reason I say that is because students now no longer come to class and get lectured to. They watch the videos, and they do the experiments on their own time outside of the classroom, just like all of you should be doing. Customer discovery experiments, customer validation experiments, product market fit experiments, all the things that the Lean Startup teaches us. This idea of launch early, iterate often, right? Done today beats perfect tomorrow. Investors are worse than customers. These kind of methodologies, which came out of the 2008 work of Steve Blank at Stanford and was the foundation of the book by Harvard's Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, they can be mapped. And so I don't want you to think that this is the only path. This path we have found works for small and medium-sized enterprises, for digital startups, for services. It doesn't work for pharmaceutical drug discovery, and it doesn't work for biotechnology. So we don't encourage our students to start businesses like that. Pharmaceutical care is another level. But what it does is it gets the students doing entrepreneurship, talking to real live people. And only after establishing the need and establishing the solution potential, then you start making a minimum viable product, a prototype to test. And so by walking students through this, it gives them the false confidence that they know what to do next. Now, what you already know and what they eventually figure out is the learning isn't here. The learning is out there. And so by doing these experiments with real life potential customers, they're able to develop their experiential learning. They're able to develop entrepreneurial knowledge, just like you do. Entrepreneurship is tacit, so it's like riding a bicycle, playing the guitar, or meditating, right? All those things have in common. They're not arts or sciences, they're practices. The more you do them, the better you get. And so this structure is just a way to force you through all of the necessary experiments before over-investing. The old idea of I'm going to build it and then take it to market is dead. Today, you build a really basic prototype, and if someone's willing to pay to use it, then you know you're on the right path. When our startups come back and they've had to leave a prototype behind, I consider that the greatest proof ever. If your demo customers won't give you back your demo because it's doing too much value for them, and this really happens, you have something. If people are willing to buy it when it's shitty and doesn't look great and is held together with duct tape, that means their problem is such that it's big enough they'll put up with that. And it's the same. Who's ever used a website with the word beta on it? You all have Gmail with beta? What does beta really mean? I'm sorry.
Stuff up without customers complaining too much.
Or as we say in Canada, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Putting beta is apologizing for the lack of perfection. But if people still use it when it's beta, like they use Gmail by the millions, now you know you've got something. And so Gmail didn't take off beta until it had worked out the bugs. So we try to get our students not to wait until it's perfect, but to get to market. Now, we've had lots of different opportunities and the students have learned from them, but most of all, they now know that there is a map. This map, the map from MIT, the map from Stanford, and all of this is publicly available. If you go and look at the websites of the founders of Spotify, you will see them talking through this in their blog. They may not know the specific name. They may not know what it's called in theory. If you want to access this, by the way, you can go to 100 steps to startup.com. We've given you a promo code. I think this is like a $300 product, but it's like $40 for you. But the friends at Sydney School of Entrepreneurship are considering, with our friends at the University of New England, making it available to you for free. Because the learning comes from when you go through it together. So if you want to check it out, by all means, just use that promo code and get the discount, or check it out or see how it impacts you. But if you're struggling to figure out what's next, you can go and use this to figure out where you are and then pick it up to go to the next level. So what are the 5 reasons why now is the best time to be an entrepreneur? It's more affordable than ever. Money is no longer a barrier. It's no longer it's no longer geocentric, it's geo-agnostic, meaning all of your customers can access you as long as they can access the internet. Global teams mean you don't have to suffer with the person next to you who can hold out for the best co-founder. Tools and platforms allow you to get started out of the box. You don't need to learn how to code to write a Facebook ad these days. You just need to use Facebook. And finally, we know the path to success. So if you were worried I can't start a business because I can't afford it, we know that's not true. If you're saying to yourself, I don't live in a big city, I can't get to my customers, that's not true. If you're saying I live in a smaller town and I don't have founders here that I can rely on, that's no longer a hindrance. I don't know what to do. Well, that is the purpose of SRI. That is the purpose of the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. It is made up of the post-secondary institutions trying to provide an entire generation with the business skills that have worked elsewhere. And I don't know how, we know the path. So when you put it all together, I want you to try to remember that starting a company is a lot like a diet. Many people get it wrong about a diet. They think it's the decision to go on the diet that makes you thin, but it's not. It's the daily shutting of your mouth that makes you thin. It's the daily little things that make you thin. Being a successful entrepreneur isn't about the decision of what idea to take or to get started. It's about working towards your goal a little bit every day, learning from your mistakes, and continuing to move forward. I think it's really important in the modern day that we recognize not only are jobs being created by the entrepreneurs and not the employers, but change is being created by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs lead innovation. We've known that since Schumpeter's paper in 1938. We know that entrepreneurs lead to the change. We know that Blockbuster Video was killed by Netflix. And that Netflix innovation about streaming then trickles through the rest of the community. It's not just social entrepreneurship that makes an impact, it's all entrepreneurship. When I was a lad and a lady would break up with me, she would write me a Dear John letter. You know what they do today? They text. And that's if you're lucky. Apparently they just ghost, which is like ignoring someone apparently. I had to look it up. But my point here is that what drives innovation, what drives quality of life, what drives success, it's the entrepreneurs. And we all have that. Being an entrepreneur, you're not born with it, you're not trained into it, it's a choice. You choose to get up every day and put on your big girl and big boy pants and struggle, because that's where the future lies. It lies not in what's known, but what's unknown. And it requires entrepreneurs like yourselves to drive that change. My name is Sean Wise. I hope this has been somewhat helpful to you. If not, we have free drinks to make you feel better. I'm happy to take questions, and I do have some things to give away to encourage participation. If you're a little shy, if you don't want to wait around to ask a question, that's my direct email. I get about 1,000 emails a day, and I try to answer them all. You're more than welcome to contact me one-on-one. With that, I'm going to ask my host to come up here, and perhaps we can answer some questions and have a discussion of what's on your mind. Thank you.